We keep nuclear weapons underground in this country, in big, they call them silos. They are shaped like farm silos that hold grain, but instead of going up, they go down. And all over the northern plain states, we have these underground silos, these massive underground fortresses, which hold huge nuclear-armed intercontinental ballistic missiles in Montana, Wyoming, North Dakota. And a lot of them, especially the first ones that we built, are up in that northern tier of the country because they are a Cold War relic. And the idea was that you'd want them in the inland northern tier of the U.S., A, so you'd have plenty of time to see any incoming threat to those sites flying in from either coast, so you wanted them way inland. But B, you also wanted them way north, so you could fire those intercontinental ballistic missiles north over the Arctic Circle as the fastest path to go hit Moscow, right? To go hit Russia, or I guess the Soviet Union, since it was a Cold War thing. And there were some earlier missile silos with different kinds of weapons, but mostly what we think of when we think of those nuclear missile silos on the northern plains, mostly what we think of are the Minuteman sites for these huge 50-foot-long nuclear-armed intercontinental missiles, the Minuteman missiles. And those Minuteman missile sites in Montana, North Dakota, Wyoming, those started to go in the early to mid-1960s. And they are still there and still functioning today, because we as a country still have thousands of live nuclear weapons that we maintain in a constant state of readiness because sure, why not? But if you're going to decide as a country to do that, one thing you can't then do is let those nuclear weapons and those nuclear weapons sites fall into disrepair, right? This isn't like old books or soccer balls that you stash in a milk crate on a shelf in your garage and forgot about, and, you know, look, the mice got to them. Right? These are real live nuclear weapons that need upkeep and modernization. They need care and tending. So a few months ago, there was a review of the physical condition of these decades-old silos where to this day we keep hundreds and hundreds of these huge nuclear weapons. And at the end of that review, the Air Force reported, we need to dig all new silos for our nuclear missiles. Turns out these silos we dug starting in the 1960s aren't going to last forever. They're leaking, they're crumbling, they're no place to keep live nuclear weapons and the crews that watch them and maintain them and stand ready to launch them 24 hours a day. So we need new silos. We need new physical sites for these ground-based nukes. And if that sounds expensive, you are right. But also you've got to, right? I mean, maybe we shouldn't actually have these nuclear weapons. That's an argument that might be worth having. But if we're not having that argument and we are going to keep these nuclear missiles, all these thousands of them, right, then we do have to keep them safely. If we're going to have the nukes, we've got no choice but to maintain them and upgrade them as needed to keep them safe. Right. Right. We can all agree on that. Right. Right. Well, President Donald Trump is now robbing the ground-based nuclear missiles safety and modernization budget for himself. He is robbing that budget. Quote, no one wants to discuss a mysterious $934 million transfer of funds from the Pentagon project to modernize America's aging ground-based nuclear missiles. But that amount, $934 million, was slipped into an obscure Pentagon document sent to Capitol Hill as a transfer to an unnamed classified project. In recent weeks, congressional budget sleuths have come to think that that amount almost certainly includes the renovation of the new gold-adorned airplane from Qatar that President Trump desperately wants to be in the air before his term is over. Air Force officials privately acknowledge, quote, dipping into nuclear modernization funds for the airplane project. That's from reporters David Sanger and Eric Schmidt at the New York Times. And just to underscore that last point again, just in case that didn't sink in, they actually say it twice in the article. When asked last week, the Air Force said it simply could not discuss the cost or anything else about the airplane because it is classified. But Air Force officials privately concede that they are paying for the renovations of the Qatari Air Force One with the transfer from the Pentagon program to rebuild America's aging, leaky ground-launched nuclear missile system. So our aging, leaky, ground-launched nuclear missile system needs some attention, needs a little TLC because, you know, they're huge armed nuclear missiles under the ground in Montana and Wyoming and all over the place in silos built for them, I don't know, 60 years ago. So they need a little TLC, our live nuclear weapons, but Trump is taking the money from that program for himself to instead fix up this plane that he wants, which, yes, he will use as Air Force One while he's president, but then, remember, he plans to keep it for himself after his presidency as part of his presidential library, which is a thing that does not exist. Diverting $934 million in taxpayer funds from the Pentagon for nuclear weapon safety to instead making sure he gets the gold inlay he knows he deserves on the plane he plans to take with him when he goes. Everywhere, all over the world, these guys are all the same, and they all want gold toilets. They all want to rob the country they lead blind to give them gold gewgaws that make them feel special. But that's more fun than actually governing, right?